All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. This is my reaction after the conclusion of Sunday night action for Week 16 of the NFL 2024 season. But yeah, so let's just go right into it. I don't want to keep you here for forever. Don't want this to be a eternity-long video. So looking at the games Saturday, Saturday we had some really good games. Texans Chiefs to start off the day. This one was one that it stayed close throughout the first half. I will say that. It was certainly one that was close enough to stay entertaining, but really throughout most of the game, the Chiefs pretty much controlled the game at home at Arrowhead. And, of course, there was the concern going into Saturday of, how was Patrick Mahomes going to look? How was the ankle going to look? They talked about him having a little bit of extra protection on the ankle, but, outside of a couple plays where he got up, grimacing and maybe looking like maybe there was some pain he was dealing with, for the most part, he looked like his normal self. Had plenty of big runs that were huge for the Chiefs on offense, Mahomes looked like his normal self. And, one of the bigger win margins they've had all season, winning by a score of 27-19, so only winning by 8 points, but that's still, for them this season, pretty much all their games have been decided by less than a touchdown. So for the Chiefs, that was a pretty big margin of victory this year. And not only that, but it was against a playoff team in the Texans. So, the Chiefs and the Texans, that game to me felt pretty accurate to what you might expect. You got the Chiefs, who are the likely number one seed in the AFC, going up against a pretty much a wild card team in the AFC. Of course, the Texans should end up being the number 4 seed. At least they're gonna win their division most likely. They haven't clinched it yet, I believe. I want to check that actually as I'm speaking here, but the Texans have clinched their division. Out of their division, the other teams remaining, only team left in that division with some life is the Colts. But their only chance of getting to the playoffs at this point is a wild card spot. So for the Texans, they have won their division. They will be in that top 4 seeding, and most likely they're going to end up in the number 4 seed. There's a slim chance if the Steelers and Ravens, if both of them lose enough, either one of them that wins the NFC North, maybe they slip below, but that's pretty unlikely. So most likely the NFC, the Texans are going to be the 5th seed, they're going to be the 4th seed, but really they're going to be that lowest division winner in their conference, and they're really going to feel pretty much equivalent to a wild card team. Whoever they end up playing, of course, they'll get the home game, but they'll be up against either the Chargers or Broncos most likely. They'll actually probably end up against either the Steelers or the Ravens, whichever one of those two doesn't win their division, which is pretty interesting, being that we could get a preview of that matchup here on Christmas Day, with the Texans' next game being up against the Ravens. But, so either way, my point is this Chiefs-Texans game really felt like about what you'd expect, in my opinion, assuming with what we saw from Patrick Mahomes, where he looked totally fine. It's also notable to mention that the Chiefs kind of getting healthy at the right moment. Again, there was the scare with Mahomes, but they've got Isaiah Pacheco back this last few weeks. And to be fair, Pacheco hasn't really even contributed that much. Thankfully for the Chiefs anyways, they haven't necessarily needed him to dominate on the ground. They've been able to do some damage on the ground elsewhere, but for the Chiefs, they had Hollywood Brown come back in. They're making good with their weapons that they have and that they've added throughout the season. Between Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins, not to mention Xavier Worthy, that passing game, the weapons that they have there, certainly good for Patrick Mahomes. Again, I know that's been a huge concern this last year and a half Obviously, last year they won without the greatest weapons. They did it last year. They did have a better defense last year, but this year, similar to last year, they seem to be getting healthy in the right spots at the right time, and their key players are pretty much in there right now. Really, the biggest concern that you'll hear brought up for the Chiefs is the offensive line protection. The tackles not too great, and you did see the impact of that against the Texans, but not near as much as some might have worried, especially being that there was worry that Mahomes had an ankle injury to deal with, but he dealt with it fine enough and was mobile enough and was able to deal the ball fast enough or escape pressure for the most part to where the pass rush, the bad protection wasn't as much of a factor as what some might have worried. But yeah, so I mean, that game was an entertaining one, but the Chiefs did win it at home, and pretty convincingly, in my opinion. Ravens, Steelers, you had the Ravens pretty much dominate this one. Final score 34-17. So obviously won by a good margin. And, at times the game felt really close, and it's certainly with the rivalry that this is in the NFC North. Also, Lamar Jackson coming into the game, I believe was 1-4 or 1-5 in his career against the Steelers. And, of course, Mike Tomlin as well. Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, of course, they've been coaching their respective teams for, a decade and a half plus for both of them at this point. And they've got a long-standing rivalry just between those two. And the Steelers and Mike Tomlin do have the advantage in that overall record. But, going into the game, there was that narrative that, also Mike Tomlin is a really good head coach when coaching as the underdog. His teams quite often cover the spread. They did not do that this week. And as a matter of fact, the last couple weeks, they've been underdogs. A lot of sharp bettors have taken that bet because of the fact that Tomlin is so good as an underdog coach. But the last couple weeks, the Steelers have just not been able to do it. And I think the Steelers very much, especially on offense, they really miss George Pickens. As far as a deep threat that Russell Wilson can bond with, that can take the top off the defense, without having him there available, they just don't have that quite as much. Austin's kind of been the number one target for deep threats, but he's a bit of a smaller wide receiver, and certainly not to the same level as what George Pickens is a wide receiver. So you've seen that hurt them a bit. Russell Wilson has certainly in this game and in the most recent couple weeks, he's still shown flashes of being pretty good and looking a little bit more like the old Seahawks Russell Wilson that we're used to, but then also some flashes of some mistakes that look a little bit more like what was happening in Denver, and things that caused him and Sean Payton to not get along. Just some decision making that wasn't the greatest, and in the end, 2 turnovers by Russell Wilson really ended up being some of the biggest moments of the game that turned it in favor of the Ravens. So that's how those games went. The really interesting thing about those 2 Saturday matchups between the Texans Chiefs, Steelers, and Ravens that I hadn't realized until watching the games is those 4, the NFL scheduled it in a way where those 4 all played each other Saturday, and then they're going to swap opponents, and they play all 4 of those same teams will be playing Christmas Day. So, again, we had Texans Chiefs to start off Saturday, and then Steelers Ravens. Christmas Day, you'll have at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll have the Chiefs and the Steelers starting it out, and then to finish the day, you'll have Ravens Texans at, I believe it's 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So, pretty good, fun slate for Christmas Day. Pretty good way to follow up from Saturday. It'll be a short week for all 4 teams, but they'll all be on even ground. It's not like one team is coming off of a week and a half break, basically, like sometimes happens with short weeks. All 4 of these teams will be on even ground, having to play on Christmas, so they should all have the same amount of time to prepare, and then they'll all get a mini bye going into week 17, going into week 18. They'll have a mini bye basically. Coming into today's Sunday games, certainly had a lot of matchups Sunday that were, maybe less exciting. You either had one team that's eliminated or both teams eliminated or very close. That's just kind of how it goes this late in the season. But really quick, Falcons-Giants. Falcons dominated the Giants, winning 34-7. The Giants just, no life at all. They very much look like they're tanking. They definitely need a new quarterback. The Falcons starting Michael Penix Jr. for the first time this season. He came in and didn't look great, didn't look perfect. For his first start, though, it's kind of whatever. He went 18 of 27, 202 yards, no touchdowns, one interception, and then a rating of 73.4. So certainly not a good outing for him, but being that it was only his first start of the season, not necessarily the worst thing, but it was also against the Giants, though. So, not the greatest outing to start for Michael Penix Jr., but it's his first start. We'll have to see there. But either way, even with Penix not playing very well, the Giants played even worse. And with Drew Lock at quarterback, he played even worse. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, a rating of 58.7. So, Drew Lock very much helping the Giants tank for that Shedeur Sanders pick. But yeah, not a good game there for the Giants. Both of these two teams, pretty lower tier, but the Falcons with that win and with the Buccaneers losing Sunday Night Football, which I'll get to in a bit, Falcons very much alive for the playoffs still. Giants, of course, they've been eliminated for a while. Cardinals Panthers. The Panthers finally get a win. Panthers go up to 4-11, knocking off the Cardinals in Carolina, winning 36-30. And, this was another one of those games later on this season that Bryce Young actually looked pretty good today. 17 of 26, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a rating of 107.5. Completion rating, not the greatest. Completed only 65.4% of his passes, so that's still a little lower end for what you'd like as an NFL quarterback, but certainly that rating, very good quarterback rating, played clean, didn't have, turnovers that he struggled with early on. And yeah, Carolina, they're a team that you got to hand it to them. They're one of those teams that, even though they, lost a ton of games to start the season, and, were very quickly one of the very easiest teams to eliminate from contention, they've this last month or two, they've played pretty hard, even though they haven't been getting the wins that they would obviously want. And this time they got the win, and it wasn't against just any old team. The Cardinals were playing for their playoff lives, and with the Panthers beating them, the Panthers eliminated the Cardinals. So, in a way, that's a pretty cool win. I get it as a Panthers fan. You might not be overly excited about that. That's not going to help your draft position at all. But, moving on to another game that a team that's eliminated that is now at 4-11, that quite the opposite of the Panthers. That is my Chicago Bears. I'm not going to spend too long on this game because even as a Bears fan, I barely watched it. I was watching Red Zone throughout the day. Was pretty busy with family as we are in the holidays. But yeah, the bits that I did get of the Bears game today, I didn't have too much interest. This Bears team, quite the opposite of what the Panthers have looked like. Not only have they lost, every game since that Washington game, they just look lifeless. Most of the roster, most of the players look very down, very depressed, just ready to get the season over with. Hardly fighting for each other at this point. No confidence in the front office or, the coaching staff, which I can't blame them. It's hard to blame a team for, pretty much giving up on the season when you've had your head coach fired and your current interim head coach was, 2 months ago just the passing games coordinator. And Thomas Brown, that couple weeks that he was the offensive coordinator, the Bears offense looked like it had some life there for a minute, but I've been saying it ever since they fired Matt Eberflus, especially these last 2 weeks since then. The defense has slackened a bit, which obviously that was his side of the ball. That's definitely taken a toll. And then ever since Thomas Brown got moved out of, even being the offensive coordinator up to the head coach, the offense has regressed again, to back where it was with Shane Waldron. And so, yeah, I mean, the Bears just no life. Again, they've lost, what is it now, like 9 games straight. They had started 4-2. 4-2 and have now lost 9 straight games. So quite the opposite of the Panthers, who, lost a lot of games towards the front of the season, and with that have still been very much fighting for each other and finally get a win here against a middling team. Bears, again, playing against the Lions, one of the best teams in the league, a beat up Lions team nonetheless, but yeah, even with that, the Bears were not able to keep this close, and that's my thing. Yes, the Bears had lost 7 straight under Matt Eberflus for this 9-win losing streak, but at least in those games, those were all the games that everybody was talking about, where they were winning all those games by pretty much less than a field goal on all of them. So at least the Bears were in all of those games. They just weren't getting over the hump and losing them, which did make it pretty painful, but I don't know. Lose a bunch of games by a very close margin, or lose a couple games by, not even looking competitive. Which would you take? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know at this point. It doesn't really matter. They're all L's. It's all a 9-game losing streak. And again, I can't blame players on the Bears, being upset and kind of ready to, hit the offseason, because I've talked about it ad nauseum, but it's hard to trust the Bears ownership and front office at this point. And so for all these players, the Bears really do have talent, both on offense and on defense. It was obviously way overhyped coming into the season, but I think a lot of it, rather than being on the talent, and sure, there is blame to go to many of the players, but yeah, just a lot of this season for the Chicago Bears is on the ownership and the front office, which is at fault for many of the last seasons, basically this last decade plus. Just have not built a winning culture. The Bears really need to get to this offseason, and they need to nail the head coaching hire. And whoever it is, it needs to be somebody that can change the culture. Obviously, you want somebody that can come in with a good scheme, maybe, but that's the thing with the Bears quite possibly having to go with, a offensive or defensive coordinator candidate. Whether it's that or they go get like a Mike Vrabel or some other coach, in my mind, it very much needs to be a guy that you believe can set the culture, not just some nice guy that maybe has some good schemes on one side of the ball. It needs to be somebody that can, kind of like Dan Campbell with these Lions, who, Dan Campbell's got them playing basically the best the franchise has ever played. The Bears need a culture setter, even if it's not going to be a Dan Campbell, obviously, but just somebody that can come in and change the culture and at least get the Bears back to winning some games. The team just does not have a culture of winning. And individually, as a Bears fan, the one pseudo win I guess I could take is that Caleb Williams played all right today. Some of it in garbage time, sure, but stats wise, 26 of 40, 334 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, still no picks. I mean, he's on a pretty historic run of throwing no interceptions, which, as a Chicago Bears fan, that's pretty, even though we're losing a ton of games, which, I don't know, it's so weird to think about, but, as a Bears fan, pretty used to my quarterbacks turning over the ball all the time, and Caleb is at least much better at that, but yet we've lost 9 straight with that. So it's pretty painful to see what the Bears are putting Caleb Williams and really all these players through. But yeah, Caleb playing pretty well. Also had some good runs on the ground. But that's all I'm gonna waste of your time for that game. Lions very much in Lions and Vikings. It is going to come down to them for who wants the number 1 seed in the NFC. Colts Titans. The Colts win a pretty tight one. I mean, this was tight at least earlier on in the first half. There was a bit of it where the Titans looked like they might run away with it, but they choked away the game, and pretty much the whole second half it was very obviously going for the Colts. They won it 38-30. They keep their slim playoff hopes alive, as I mentioned earlier. They are still alive for the wild card, but of course they're going to need to pretty much win out. No, they will need to win out, and they'll need some help, but they are technically still alive at this moment. Rams at the Jets. Rams won this. I had bet this one. This was one of my biggest bets of the week. Was just simply the Rams money line. I don't think I bet the spread, but their money line anyways. Bet them to win it. Just 19-9. It wasn't obviously a very high scoring game at all. Early on in the first half of the game, the Jets at home actually looked like they might win it. They went up to, they got up to 6-0, and it was a very slow slog fest. Very slow game. Matt Stafford had a pick in the game, but yeah, then the Rams scored a touchdown, failed to get the extra point, so it ended up 6-6 from there. But then after that, the Rams really just turned around and controlled the game, as you might have, or at least certainly as I had expected them to do pretty much the whole time. They won it. They keep their playoff hopes alive and their hopes for the NFC West division win, which is very possible for them at this point. Eagles Commanders. This is definitely probably one of the most exciting games of the day. Very crazy one. For the majority of the game, this looked like it should have been for the Eagles. They should have won this one in Washington and DC, but just choked away the win at the very final moment of the game. Very crazy one. This one was, in a way, very reminiscent of the Commanders defeating the Bears, except this one wasn't on a, blown Hail Mary defense by the Bears. This was, pretty good game-winning drive by Jaden Daniels, but wasn't really the greatest day for Jaden Daniels, though, either. He was picked off 2 times. The Eagles actually won the turnover battle by quite a bit. I believe they had 5 turnovers, 5 takeaways from the Commanders. But certainly one of the things that did them in a bit was Jalen Hurts got injured early on in the game, was getting looked at for a concussion, and wasn't able to return to the game. So we'll have to monitor as we go throughout this week up to week 17. It'll be interesting to see for the Eagles whether or not Jalen Hurts is able to come back in and how severe this concussion's going to be for him. But yeah, with Pickett in, they didn't do too well. He threw a pick, 1 touchdown, 72 quarterback rating. And yeah, the Commanders get a huge win against the Eagles. Commanders keeping themselves very much alive for the wild card race, and then also hurting the Eagles quite a bit in the sense that, in my opinion, I would say the Eagles are basically a lock to get the number 2 seed at this point. It's not impossible for them to get the number 1 seed still, but they are now 1 game behind both the Lions and Vikings for that race. They basically would need both the Lions and Vikings to lose in Week 17, which is not very likely, being that the Lions, for example, are playing the 49ers. So, not too likely there. The Vikings play the Packers, so that one could maybe happen, but you really need both the Lions and Vikings to lose next week, and then that final week, Lions-Vikings play each other. So if both teams lose next week, and then You know, as long as the Eagles win out, that might give them a slight chance to get in to the number 1 seed. But again, basically the chances are very slim to none that the Eagles are going to get the number 1 seed at this point. So they're pretty much locked in there. So that is really the ramifications of this game against the Commanders and losing it. And of course, the other concern is going to be Jalen Hurts' health, and that'll also make it even more difficult for them to win both of their next 2 games. Browns-Bengals. Bengals keep their slim playoff hopes alive. They win against the Browns, 24-6, very convincing win. Not a very surprising one with the Browns in tank mode at this point. Vikings-Seahawks. This was a very exciting game. Seahawks, it was pretty back and forth in Seattle, but this one was another one that I was pretty confident in the result beforehand. Vikings did win it, but it was a very close one. 27-24, came down to the wire, and Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson, just looking really good, and you got to give a lot of credit to Kevin O'Connell and what the Vikings, that front office, the Vikings definitely one of the more underrated franchises as far as how well their front office is run and how consistently at least decent they are. Certainly over the last couple decades, the division was mostly dominated by Green Bay, but if there was any team out of the Vikings, Lions, Packers that has quite often been second place or even number 1, the Vikings is one of those over the last few decades that they're quite often up there in the NFC North. Bills, Patriots, this one was a pretty crazy one in Buffalo. Patriots covered the spread, which was what I had bet them to do. The spread was huge. It was 14.5. Way too big for a division rivalry game between these two in cold weather. And with the Bills not really playing with a ton to play for, they're kind of similar to the Eagles, in my opinion. They're pretty much locked into the number 2 seed in their conference. With the Chiefs having won on Saturday, at this point, all the Chiefs need to do is win one of their next 2 games, and the Chiefs lock up the first seed. So for the Bills, their chance of getting the 1 seed is pretty unlikely at this point. So it wasn't like they were playing for a ton, other than obviously you still want the win, you still want the pride and all that. It's a division rival, but as far as playoff ramifications, this game wasn't going to do much for them. But they still fought out hard in the cold weather at home, and they come out with the win in the end. It was certainly not a guaranteed win by any means. The only reason the win probability stayed in favor of the Bills basically all game was the fact that they've got Josh Allen, they've got the better roster, the better coaching staff. Jaguars Raiders. I don't know anybody that would have watched this, including Jaguars and Raiders fans, but this was the who wants to tank more for a pick game, and it ended up being the Raiders winning it at home, defending their home turf, which put both teams to 3-12. So, hey, at least as far as for that draft pick goes, they keep each other pretty close in that sense. But 19-14, very ugly game. Backup quarterbacks on both sides. Both teams very much ready for the offseason. 49ers, Dolphins. This one, very disappointing one for the 49ers. This one, 49ers, Dolphins, both these two teams basically playing for nothing. The Dolphins' playoff hopes are technically still alive. They aren't eliminated. They're kind of in that same boat as the Colts, where if they win out and they get enough help, they could technically pass up either the Chargers or Broncos if things went their right way. And certainly getting a win today against the 49ers was a big part of keeping that hope alive. For the 49ers, I've got questions for the 49ers that, as far as what they're going to do this offseason with Brock Purdy. And certainly the loss wasn't all on him, but late in the game, he threw an interception that sealed the result of the game in a drive where, you need your quarterback to go down and win you the game, or, at least get a touchdown, get a field goal, something, so you can try to get another possession and win it. And yeah, there were points in this game where Purdy just, again, the criticism of him is that, yes, he's a really good game manager, and that's not meant to be a diss at all. Being a good game manager is half of the quarterback's job, really. But it's just, he's not the most athletic. He's not got the greatest arm. And so he's just one of those quarterbacks that just, when you see him need to scramble out of the pocket, he can certainly do it, and he can put on the speed a bit, but he's not the fastest guy out there. He's not the most elusive. And then, yeah, when it comes to great passes, deep passes, it's just not really his thing. And I get it. I get that the 49ers have been injured this year. They're missing Christian McCaffrey. I mean, heck, they're down to basically their number 4 string running back, I believe, today. So the running game very decimated for the 49ers, which is a huge part of the Shanahan offense. So I get that. But, you still have George Kittle, who had a great day today. Deebo Samuel actually had a good day today. Juwan Jennings did all right. Ricky Pearsall had a key mistake that hurt them, but even him, for what he's been through this year, he's doing all right. So again, I don't want to put all this blame on Brock Purdy. Certainly not all of it is on him, but the point is, I think he's, if I'm the 49ers, I wouldn't want to get rid of him. My only point is, I'm kind of leaning towards the side of those that are saying, if I'm the 49ers, I'm certainly not overly excited about the idea of paying Brock Purdy top of the market money right now this offseason. I'm wanting to, if I can, wait out next season and see how that goes. Or, if anything, if I'm going to sign him this offseason, I'm wanting a more respectable deal, more of a Baker Mayfield level type deal, maybe not even that low. The thing is that the story is that Purdy's representation in him, they're asking for top of the market money, which is understandable from that side. But from the 49ers side, from the business side, you got to protect your cap space. You got to have space to grow this roster, which is very much an aging roster, and obviously has dealt with a lot of injuries this year. So obviously for that, there's a lot of concern. Niners, you may want to have space to build up your roster elsewhere. So you do want that franchise quarterback, but is Brock Purdy really top of the line worth, though, as far as money goes? I'm not convinced of that. And I mean, honestly, this game was a good representation of that. On the other side, you have a team with a quarterback in Tua that, they paid him pretty close to top of the line money when they paid him. And I mean, look at him. They pretty much their whole time with him at quarterback and with the current, regime that they have, the Dolphins, they've been a playoff team in previous years, but they've, the last couple of years, but not convincingly. They've been that team that beats up on the weak teams and loses anytime they face a winning team. And this year, they're barely even that. They're middle of the road. Again, they're still alive for the playoffs, but I don't expect them to get in. And even if they got in, they'd get the number 7 seed, and they'd be a quick, easy out for the Bills. So, and the thing is with Tua, they paid him top of the line market. And again, the stuff with the Dolphins isn't all on Tua. There's some fair questions at this point, even about the coaching. I mean, I don't know. I like the coach, but, got to start winning some games against better opponents at this point, even as a coach, if you're going to be considered a genius. But yeah, so again, my point is, though, with the Brock Purdy Tua thing, Tua gets paid top of the line market money. Would it be fair to say the Dolphins maybe regret that deal? Maybe wish they were paying him a little less? Sure, maybe they couldn't have kept Tua if they tried to pay him less. If they refused to pay him what they did, maybe he would have walked and been somewhere else. And that's fair. Maybe that's, might be the corner that some of these teams get pushed into, and the Niners, that may be where they're at, unfortunately for them. But it's just, that's the problem. When you pay these quarterbacks with the amount of money that they're getting paid and the amount of the salary cap they're starting to take up, these teams, they start kind of getting pushed into a trap of, yeah, you don't want to be left out in the wilderness again and not have a quarterback. You don't want to give up this guy that's at least, doable. But if they're only just doable and you're paying them top of the line money, then your salary cap is going to take a hit, and the rest of your roster is therefore just mathematically going to take a hit elsewhere because you're not going to be able to pay for great players in other spots. So, and when that happens, you see these teams like the Dolphins that, there's other examples. Jacksonville, obviously, they paid Trevor Lawrence top of the line money. Do you think they regret that now? Obviously. The Browns, obviously this one was an extreme case, but paying Deshaun Watson what they did. The Hunt family, the owners of the Browns, they've been getting ostracized by the league ever since they made that deal. And even though that one's an extreme, again, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, tons of these quarterbacks that have gotten paid top of the line money in the last 2-3 years, many of them you'd pretty likely say that their fans, the team, probably wish that they weren't paying that quarterback quite as much currently. And so that's my concern for the Niners. They've been such a good franchise. They're always really well run. So I wouldn't be surprised if, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, eventually they're going to get over this. Shanahan, I do believe, is a good coach, a very good coach, one of the top coaches in the league. But I think, at least for the next year, maybe two, I'm not too confident in what the 49ers are going to be able to do. I think they need a pretty good-sized rebuild, honestly. Again, with the roster around Purdy needing, again, even if you keep Purdy, that's my thing. Purdy's a doable quarterback. He's got him to the Super Bowl. I'm not denying that. But my concern is just that if you need to do a rebuild, obviously any team is going to not necessarily be a competitor at that point, but this team does need a rebuild. And it's kind of hard to rebuild when you're overpaying a quarterback that is just, sure, maybe above average quarterback, but, not a top tier quarterback. He's a tier 2 quarterback, let's say, somewhere between top 10 and top 15. He's, maybe somewhere in there. Like, do you really want to be paying top of the line money, number one quarterback salary for a ranked 15th guy? I don't know. Again, sure, he's got the accolades to, certainly if I was representing Purdy, I would argue that he does deserve that money. But if I'm on the side of the 49ers, if I'm a 49ers fan that just simply wants the team to do good, no matter who's there, I'm just not too sure that I'm ready to give Purdy the huge quarterback deal just yet. And again, I get the argument too that Purdy has done as well as he has while making basically peanuts for what a quarterback usually makes, because he was the last pick of the draft. So I get that in a way, as far as people wanting things to be fair for Purdy as a quarterback. I get it. He deserves his money. He's played well enough. He deserves a good contract in the NFL. But again, even a good quarterback contract doesn't necessarily have to be top of the line money. And again, for Purdy and for the Niners, kind of depends. You got these quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. I don't expect most players to be this way, but those two quarterbacks, the greatest of all time, and I would say the current best quarterback of all time, in Patrick Mahomes, are one of the most talented. Certainly the one that is chasing Brady at this moment. Those two quarterbacks pretty much never took top of the line money. They took less money, knowing that if they were doing the winning that they were doing, they were going to get more money elsewhere through sponsorships, things like that. So, and Purdy's already doing pretty good with sponsorships. He's been in tons of ads. So as far as money, he's already making up some of the contract there. But again, I'm not saying that every quarterback or every player should, be willing to take less than what they can get. These are, as a pro, you got to take what you can. An NFL career could be shortened like that. A serious, crazy injury, freak things happen in football. You never know. So I certainly don't blame any players for going for top of the line money. I'm just saying, from the side of the team standpoint and from the team building standpoint, if you're a general manager, an owner, a coach, a fan that just wants your team to do good over time, paying Brock Purdy top of the line money, I'm not sure that I would be confident in saying that's a good idea yet. And certainly this game didn't help with that for Brock Purdy's side. Final game to talk about really quick. Buccaneers Cowboys Sunday Night Football. This one was a really exciting one down to the wire. But the Cowboys pretty much controlled the game, winning 26-24. I'm sure Cowboys fans were on the edge of their seat waiting for disappointment. As a Bears fan, I would know this game very much felt like there was a chance for the Cowboys to choke this one away, and they almost narrowly did. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you the win percentage graph for this game because it's pretty telling of what I'm talking about here. So looking at this right here on Next Gen Stats, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Pretty much the whole game, the graph slowly is trending towards the Cowboys as they just controlled the game. They kept the lead pretty much throughout. Tampa Bay kept making mistakes. Mayfield throws a pick. The Cowboys, even with just Cooper Rush in at quarterback, doing pretty well through the air. I mean, Cooper Rush, look, 292 yards. This was a very pass-heavy game for both sides. But, yeah, the Cowboys were able to get into the end zone more, obviously. And also quite a few long field goals as well helped. But, basically the whole game, the Cowboys controlled it. But then that, mid to late third quarter, into the fourth quarter, the Bucs were doing just enough to chip away and get close that it was like, ooh, I don't know. And this is where you see right here on the graph, you see it start spiking up towards the Buccaneers. Sure, it never got back up over 37%, but right here, this moment, this is where it felt like, okay, the Buccaneers have the time. They've got a chance to come win it. And then, of course, the thing that changed it, basically the final meaningful play of the game, Baker Mayfield, a pretty crazy looking play too, but scrambling around, avoiding pressure, trying to make things happen, gives it to White, who ends up getting some yards and then fumbling the ball, turning it back over to the Cowboys, and that sealed the result for the game. But so a disappointing result for the Buccaneers, certainly. Good win at home for the Cowboys, who haven't had that many wins at home this year. So they finally got a win for their home crowd in Dallas. But for the Buccaneers, this one's more concerning for them because they're not eliminated by any means. But as you can see here, their playoff chances now are 51% to win the division, 46%. And really, these should almost be pretty much the same thing. The only reason they're higher for this is that theoretically, with some help and winning out, the Falcons or Buccaneers could technically still get a wild card spot, but they would basically need the Commanders to lose out, and other teams as well that are in the hunt. They'd need to pass them up. But yeah, really these two teams most likely just playing to see who's going to win the division, and the Buccaneers had been controlling the top of the division this last week or two since Kirk Cousins started struggling. But with this loss, with a win, the Buccaneers would have gone to, I believe it was close to like 90% chance to win the division. Now they've dropped down to currently sitting in second place in their division. They no longer control their own destiny there, and 51% to make the playoffs, with Falcons at 54% to win it. So, that loss hurt the Buccaneers quite a bit. And then with that, I want to really quick, just do a quick, as I'm feeling about things right now, how do I think the playoff picture is going to shape up? So this is week 16. Basically, all the games are in. I'm going to say the Packers, predictably win this game. That does help the Saints the Falcons, as you can see here, putting them into that spot. although I believe they should have been there anyways. I don't know why this machine didn't have them in there. Anyways, results should be Falcons should be in that number 4 seed by the end of this week. And again, Packers should handle the Saints just fine. Saints are eliminated. So now, for the Christmas games, I'm going to say the Chiefs win it. It'll be close. Certainly there's a chance that the Steelers win this, but I'm going to take the Chiefs to win here. And then let's say the Ravens win it here. Again, you can see because of the Steelers losing against the Ravens Saturday, and with the results of this week, this would put the Ravens squarely in control of the AFC North, and I do think that'll happen. I think they'll keep that control. And then Seahawks Bears in Chicago, final home game for Chicago on Thursday Night Football. I'm sorry, but the Bears just haven't shown any level of life this last couple weeks since Eberflus was fired. I don't think they're winning against any team. I don't even know if the Bears are going to cover the spread. Last I checked, they were underdogs by 3 points. That's probably gone up at this point. And to be honest, if I had to bet on it right now, I would probably bet on the Seahawks to still cover. So, as a Bears fan, I don't have any confidence in the team's fight right now. I hope to be proven wrong in this next couple weeks, but in the end, it doesn't matter a whole ton. Chargers, Patriots. I do think the Chargers are going to win this one. Could be interesting. It'll be a West Coast to East Coast trip for them. It'll be a long flight, into some likely cold weather up there. So maybe that helps. This should be a low-scoring game, but I think a Jim Harbaugh led team that is certainly playoff hopes alive. I think they get the win there. Broncos, Bengals. This one's a very interesting one because Bengals, a team that still isn't eliminated. They basically need to win out to get the wild card spot. And of course, as you can see, the wild card spot they'd be chasing is the one that the Broncos themselves hold. Of course, the issue here is, and the question is the Bengals defense. Can they stop a nosebleed? I'm not sure. They've looked better this last, certainly they looked better today against the Browns, but that doesn't mean much. They've still looked not that great. Very vulnerable defense. Trying to defend a Sean Harbaugh-led team that has looked pretty good. This one's a tough one. I could see this one being low-scoring or even a shootout. I could see things getting pretty crazy between these two teams, especially with Joe Burrow and that offense being pretty high-powered all season. Just for the sake of keeping things interesting here, I'm going to give the Bengals the win here. As you can see, that would, for now, the Broncos still stay in control of the number 7 seed, but this would keep things in the AFC way more interesting for not only the Bengals, but it would keep things more interesting for possibly other teams like the Colts. Rams, Cardinals. Cardinals are eliminated at this point. Rams, of course, sitting in control. I do think they'll win this. It's possible it goes the other way. This one's an interesting rivalry in the NFC West, but I do think the Rams take control of business at home. Bills, Jets. The Jets have no life. I have no confidence in them. Bills get the win. Jaguars, Titans. I do think the Titans win this one. That one's not going to impact the playoffs much or at all. Bucks, Cardinals. Bucks, Panthers. This one could be interesting. I do think the Buccaneers come out angry. They know the playoffs are on the line for them. They get the win at home. Vikings, Packers. This one could be one of the best games of the week. And certainly being that this one will be on the weekend, this one might be one of the best games during the weekend following Christmas. I would say I'm going to go with the Vikings at home, which, as you can see, for the moment, would put them in the number 1 seed, but we have yet to get to the Lions game here. Saints, Raiders, teams playing for draft position at this point. I think the Raiders, coming off of a win finally at home, going back on the road, Saints coming off a loss to the Packers. I think the Saints will get this one here, but this one only is going to matter as far as the draft position. And the Raiders, this one will help you get closer to maybe having a chance at Shedeur Sanders or whichever quarterback you may want to draft. Colts, Giants. I do think the Colts handle the Giants just fine in New York. Keep their playoff hopes alive, albeit slim. And then Browns, Dolphins. This one doesn't matter. These two are eliminated. But, again, as I said, Dolphins, they always beat up on the weak teams. They're certainly better than that. So they will be a tanking Browns team. Cowboys, Eagles. The Eagles are going to come out angry about the loss against the Commanders. They do want to still stay alive for the 1 seed. And the Cowboys, they're just coming off of a pretty close, tight win on Sunday Night Football. So they'll lose a rivalry game here in Philadelphia. Commanders versus the Falcons. This one's an interesting one, obviously, because it has major implications for the NFC, and not only the NFC South as a whole, but also for the wild card picture. I'm going to go with the Commanders here. They're the better team, and that would, at least for the time being, especially if the Packers lose here against the Vikings, that would move the Commanders into the number 6 seed for the time being. And then the final game of the week, I do have the Lions winning against the 49ers, who are struggling, and that, again, puts the Lions back in control of the number 1 seed, and I think they get it here, but again, it's not decided yet. It is going to be decided by the final game for the Lions and Vikings. So, final week of the season. Let's rapid fire a couple of these. Houston wins. They win the division. Falcons, they get the win against the Panthers. Keep themselves, slim hopes, but they keep them alive. And they're praying for the Buccaneers' downfall here, but I don't think it happens. I got the Buccaneers winning it. This one's going to be one of those where it's devastating for the Falcons, but they barely lose out. 1 game behind their division rival. And then Rams, Seahawks. This one could be an interesting one. Definitely could have implications, as a matter of fact. So let's say Seahawks win it. Seahawks would actually still be eliminated from the playoffs, but they could move the Rams down. Or if the Rams win, which I think is more likely, they will stay in the number 3 seed in the NFC. Bills get a win against the Patriots. Jets, Dolphins. I take the Dolphins here to win it. Although, I'm going to flip that. It's in New York. It's going to be late. It's going to be a cold game. I've got the Jets winning their final game of the season. Ravens, Browns. Browns are done for. The Ravens get the win. Close out the season in the right fashion. This one, interesting, because this one's one where the Bengals are playing for whatever slim hopes they would have to get into the playoffs. Bengals would be at 8-8 going into this game. If they win, 9-8, and should the Broncos lose, they might take the spot. I mean, let's just take that into account. So let's say Bengals win here. Obviously, that also changes things for the Patriots for the Steelers, if they won that. So if the Bengals win, and then let's say the Broncos lose to the Chiefs, which is very possible, that would put the Bengals at least ahead of the Broncos. Now, do I think that's actually going to happen? Bengals on the road, final week against Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. This one's going to be a very interesting game. Could be one of the better games of Week 18. I'm going to stick with this prediction because I think it is possible, and because I think it's more. No, I'm sorry. I don't trust the Bengals defense at all. So I'm going with Tomlin and the Steelers at home. I do think it's more interesting for the AFC playoff race if the Bengals win here, but I can't trust their defense. Colts, Jaguars, I do think the Colts keep themselves barely alive. But again, as you can see, even with the Broncos losing against the Chiefs, it wouldn't matter. So really, the Colts need the Colts hopes pretty much out. I mean, they may need more help. I'm not sure if it's going to be off of strength of wins or what the tiebreaker comes down to for them versus the Broncos. But I think Colts' chances pretty slim to none at this point. As a matter of fact, I think on Next Gen Stats they've got them in like single digit percentage. So they're pretty much out, but they do get the win the final week against the Jaguars. Raiders, Chargers. I think the Chargers handle business. Just a couple hours north, up I-15 in Vegas. I think they get the win there. They secure themselves a playoff seat in the number 6 spot, most likely. And then for the NFC side, Dallas and the Commanders. I'm going to say the Commanders win this on the road. Cowboys lose another heartbreaker at home. Obviously, Commanders will be playing 4 more, but you never know with these division games. The underdog team always likes to play spoiler if they can, so maybe the Cowboys get another good win there. Eagles, Giants, this one's not going to be close. Lions, Vikings, I'm going to come back to that one. Packers, Bears in Lambeau. Let's just get that one over with. Bears season's over, and they go and hire a new coach. 49ers, Cardinals. This game isn't going to have any impact on the playoffs, but we'll say we give it to the Cardinals. And then final game of the season. Actually, sorry. I'm going to give that to the 49ers. Shanahan and Purdy, the weapons they do have, aging or not, the issues they have. 49ers win, and hey, 49ers winning the final game against a division opponent, maybe that makes the Brock Purdy conversation just a little bit more interesting going into the offseason for them. And then, final game to look at here, Vikings, Lions. This one is crazy because it's Week 18. I will be very surprised if this game doesn't get put on Sunday Night Football, because this game is going to probably, of all these, have the biggest ramifications for the playoffs easily out of any of these remaining games in the season. Because again, if my predictions are right, which wouldn't be pretty hard to believe. I mean, the Lions beating the 49ers, that's easy to believe. The Vikings beating the Packers, certainly believable. That one should be a closer one. And of course, if the Packers win this upcoming week against the Vikings, Week 18, this game maybe won't be a Sunday Night Football game. But assuming these two teams are still alive for the number 1 seed, this game should get put into the Sunday Night Football slot, I would assume. And with that, this is going to be the Vikings on the road in Detroit. This would be an insane primetime game, whatever slot it gets put in, assuming Sunday Night Football. Both these two teams playing, some of their best football in, franchise history. Certainly for the Lions, a franchise season. Again, I just, honestly right now, I do have concerns for the Lions with their injuries right now. There's just more injury concern to go around for them. And with that, though, the thing is, I don't know. Both these two teams are obviously going to want the first round bye if they can get it. I just don't know who to give it to. I think this could be a very exciting game. Because the thing is, even with the injuries for the Lions, they've still looked pretty good. They're still a team that you just can't count out. Their offense still high-powered, even missing David Montgomery, which also I saw just today that apparently David Montgomery is actually planning on foregoing surgery for right now and is going to try to rehab himself to maybe be able to get involved in the playoffs, maybe by the time of the divisional round. So that's interesting. Obviously, that wouldn't help the Lions here necessarily, but I don't know. I think it would be very interesting if the Vikings win it, and take over the number 1 seed, especially with how low the expectations were for the Vikings. From me, from a lot of people, I did not expect the Vikings to be this high, and in this race so tightly. But again, Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, obviously he's a stud, but did not expect Sam Darnold to work out nearly this good. I did not respect really the rest of the Vikings roster enough. Jordan Addison, I mean, him being their number 2 wide receiver, he looks pretty good for a number 2 wide receiver. Probably would be a 1 with many NFL teams at the moment. I think I will go with the Lions. It's at home. Their fan base, again, they've been through a lot more than, both these fan bases have been tortured in different ways, but, Detroit, they certainly deserve it, which is not how sports goes, but I still, even with the defensive injuries, at home, I think in a primetime slot, they get the win. But yeah, if I did have any concerns for why they would lose this game, it would be because the injuries and, sometimes situationally, I still don't necessarily trust Dan Campbell, whereas the Vikings, I might trust them a little bit more in close situations. Now, if these two teams were to tie, won't matter too much. The Lions will win it. So, thing is, for the Lions, if we get to this point in Week 18, the way I've simulated things, the Lions don't even need to win. They can end in a tie and still win the number 1 seed. So, I'm going to see the Lions win it. And with that is going to wrap up my reaction to Week 18 of NFL action here. So I appreciate you for watching this far. This is a full-on podcast episode. This is going to be an hour-long episode. So if you've gotten this far, please hit the like, comment down below what you thought of the video. What are you thinking about these matchups going forward this next couple weeks? Don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Happy holidays, and I will see you in the next video.